Mark your calendars, save the date, and join me live on Twitch at 9 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday, December 21st, 2022, where we'll play NFL trivia in our jackpot game and give away over $300 in cash prizes to our winner. Link to join below. And now, on with our feature presentation. December 18th, 1982. It's the 7th game of the strike-shortened 9-game season, and as we hit the home stretch, we have an absolutely big interconference battle on our hands over at the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum between the Los Angeles Raiders and the Los Angeles Rams. To say that there was a ton of drama surrounding this game would be a massive understatement. From what this meant in determining the playoff picture, this game was big. The Raiders entered at 5-1, and while they seemed to be comfortably in the playoff picture, a win would not only clinch a spot, but would propel them to the number 1 seed in the conference, and home field advantage throughout. The Rams entered at 1-5, and while they had a shot at the playoffs if they won their final 3 games, which was absolutely attainable, seeing as their final 2 opponents were the Bears and 49ers, 2 teams with a combined record of 4-8, if they lost this game, they would be out, and heads would be rolling in the offseason. From an off-the-field standpoint of the battle for Los Angeles, this game had a ton of drama. Yes, the players tried to downplay it as much as they could, but this felt like one of the weirdest games of all time. You had a Rams team that played for over 3 decades at the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum, and moved after the 1979 season to go to Anaheim, and was now going back to that stadium as the visiting team, even though they're in the same city. You had a Raiders team that was playing this game as the home team, even though because of the strike, they hadn't fully finished moving everything from Oakland, meaning that you had a Raiders team that was flying down from Oakland to Los Angeles to play as the home team, and a Rams team that was busing as the road team. You don't see that every day. And from the standpoint of the actual game itself, this game had a ton of drama. Because when all was said and done, in front of a national television audience on CBS, seeing as this was a Saturday afternoon game and got the national treatment, the Raiders prevailed by a final score of 37-31, in what was an exciting back-and-forth affair. The Rams had a tendency for blowing close games all season where they had a lead, from a 23-0 lead in the second half on opening day against the Packers, to a 14-0 lead in the second half in their 3rd game against the Falcons, to a 21-0 lead against the Broncos the previous week. And this was no exception, as even though they led it 21-7 at the half, and led it 31-30 with 2 minutes left in the 4th quarter, at the end of the day, it was not enough, as an 11-yard touchdown run by Marcus Allen with 29 seconds left gave the Raiders the late victory, ripping the hearts out of the Rams faithful once again. So yeah, there was a ton of drama surrounding this game. But there was another element to the drama that we haven't mentioned yet. It's an element that you might not have known about or even been aware about at the time unless you were living in the Los Angeles area. But it's the broadcasting element of it. Because prior to the game, CBS got in a massive feud with the Raiders and the Rams, where pressure forced the 2 teams to do something that they absolutely did not want to do. And to say that there was outrage surrounding this, and just how unfair it felt, and how chaotic it was, would be putting it lightly. Because this is the story behind the forgotten broadcasting drama involving the Raiders, the Rams, and CBS that rocked the 1982 NFL season. It's no secret that after the Raiders moved to Los Angeles, they struggled getting fans there at first. Granted, it didn't help at all that they didn't play their first home game there until the strike concluded. So by the time they first stepped foot in the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum, any fans who were willing to welcome the Raiders with open arms and give them a honeymoon period were gone. Because there was such a bitter taste in their mouths due to not having football for 2 months. As a side note, if you want to learn more about the strike and some of the bizarre broadcasting events that happen as a result, click the card in the upper right corner. For Raider games, the capacity of the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum was somewhere around 73,000. It was significantly higher for games involving the Rams when they used to play there, but the seating configuration was a bit different. Regardless, for their first 2 games in LA, the attendance came nowhere close to that. For their first game, a 28-24 victory over the San Diego Chargers, only 42,162 fans attended. This was despite the fact that the game was on Monday Night Football and the fact that San Diego was only 2 hours away, so visiting fans could have taken up the tickets. The good news was that for their second game, a 28-23 victory over the Seattle Seahawks, the attendance went up. The bad news was that it went up by a whole 8 people, from 42,162 fans to 42,170 fans. The game got blacked out as a result. Bottom line, it was looking highly unlikely that any games involving the Raiders at home this season were going to sell out. And this meant that, per NFL policies, blackouts would go into effect. The blackout rule, in essence, says that if a game did not sell out within the allotted time frame, usually somewhere between 48 and 72 hours beforehand, that the game could not be shown on local television, and instead, other games had to be aired. In other words, because the Raiders came nowhere close to selling out their allotment for the Seahawks game, no one in Los Angeles could watch that game on TV. Now, there were some exceptions to the rule, where the blackout rule got dropped. The Chargers game, for instance, was not blacked out, even though it was not a sellout, since many NFL teams decided as a goodwill gesture toward the fans to show all the games on TV for the first week after the strike. The last thing they wanted to do to angry fans is tick them off even more by telling them that after 2 months, they still can't watch their team play and they have to pay money to do so. But by this point in the season, and by this point in December, that was long gone, and everything was back to normal. It's like the teacher in high school that doesn't punish you for being late on the first day of class, because you're trying to figure out where all of your classrooms are, and your schedule with regards to speed in the hallways and going to your locker. But by the end of the first week, the teacher expects you to have that figured out, and docks you for being late. With that, even with the Rams being in the same city as the Raiders, it was looking like this game was going to be blacked out. It wasn't coming anywhere close to a sellout. The game was taking place on a Saturday, and by late Thursday night, only somewhere in the ballpark of 60,000 tickets had been sold. Sure, that's the highest number yet since the Raiders moved to Los Angeles, but that's still only about 80% of the way there. You're not selling out the rest, and you're not filling up the Coliseum, no matter how hard you try. Because of this, a spokesman for the Raiders announced that the game would not be televised in Los Angeles. If people were going to watch this game, then they were either going to have to buy a ticket, or they would have to travel outside the city and find a sports bar or a motel outside of the Los Angeles area and get the game that way. This was what a lot of people did back then. Motels near Los Angeles but not in LA made an absolute killing at Super Bowl I due to the game getting blacked out locally. So this should be a non-story, right? Whatever your thoughts on the blackout policy are, it's in place. It's been enforced throughout the season and throughout the last decade. And the game wasn't going to be shown because of it. End of discussion. Well, that's where CBS comes into the picture. Usually, blackouts aren't a huge deal to the station televising the game, since you're still airing a game that day. As an example, when the Raiders-Seahawks game got blacked out on NBC back on December 5th, NBC still showed a game that Sunday, as they aired the battle between the San Diego Chargers and the Cleveland Browns. But this Raiders-Rams game was different, because this game was taking place on a Saturday. There were only 2 games airing that day, and both were supposed to be shown to a national audience. You had the Dolphins and Jets playing each other on NBC at 12:30 Eastern, and you had the Raiders and Rams playing each other on CBS at 4 o'clock Eastern. This doubleheader Saturday was always one of the most anticipated days of the season from a national television audience standpoint. And because of this blackout, CBS, in one of the largest television markets in the entire country, was going to be shut out, and was going to have to show old movies instead. And usually, this isn't a huge deal, and this is a non-story. Things like this happen all the time back then, with a ton of games on Monday Night Football on ABC not being aired locally because of blackout rules and the game not selling out. But in 1982, Oh, you can bet that CBS was furious about this. They had been screwed over a ton because they lost practically their entire programming slate on Sundays for 2 months. The NFL was a ratings goldmine. It was the thing they could always rely on, and was their bread and butter. And for a period of 2 months, they didn't have it, and they had to air random sporting events and alternate programming, losing out on a ton of money and advertising dollars because of it. And the ratings still hadn't fully recovered by this point. You already screwed us over with the entire ordeal of the strike, and now you're gonna screw us over again and cause us to lose a ton of money when ad rates are at their highest since it's the holiday season? Yeah, CBS was understandably not too pleased about Channel 2 not being able to air this game live, and having to show movies, which don't have as many opportunities for ads and don't pull in high ratings. Because of this, CBS went over to the Rams and the Raiders, since there was a stipulation in the blackout rule that said that the blackout could be lifted if both teams agreed to do so. And CBS laid their cards out on the table, basically telling the Raiders and Rams to agree to lift it. CBS wasn't going to buy up the remaining tickets to make it a sellout. You were going to lift the blackout. You screwed us over for 2 months with your greed, and you're not going to screw us over again on arguably the biggest Saturday of the regular season and prevent us from having to schedule something other than football. As Al Locasale, a spokesman for the Raiders, said on this, "We got an awful lot of pressure from CBS to lift the blackout. It meant a lot of money to them. And whatever CBS said clearly worked. Because not even a few hours after the Raiders announced that the game was getting blacked out, they announced that they were changing their minds, despite the fact that roughly 17,000 tickets were still unsold. And the way that the Raiders backtracked on this was absolutely hysterical. As one Raiders spokesman said, even though the game is far short of being a sellout, both teams felt, because of the interest in it, it should be televised." Wait a second, hold up. Because of the interest in it? What do you mean because of the interest? The game's not even close to sold out. You're making your product available for free now, whereas you weren't before. If I have a product that's selling like hotcakes because I'm a smart businessman, I'm not just gonna make it free. That's a lame excuse. That's a cop-out. You can't say that you changed your mind because of the interest level. Because was the interest level any different now than it was a couple of hours ago? At 9 a.m. on Friday, people couldn't care less about this Raiders-Rams game and the battle for LA. But 3 hours later, they were all on board. Yeah, I don't buy that for a second. If there was so much interest in the game, then why didn't you just lift the blackout before? Why didn't you sell out? This is just a PR way of saying that CBS forced our hand. CBS basically pressured us into airing this game and lifting the blackout when we didn't want to and didn't have to, seeing as no other facts changed in between the time of the announcement that the blackout was happening and the time of the announcement that the blackout was being lifted. When you learn how to read through PR speak, oh man, things get hysterical, as they do here, because this explanation makes no sense otherwise, especially since it was confirmed a few days later that CBS pressured the Raiders and Rams to do this, and throw them a bone. As one writer later said on this fiasco, why wait until the last minute to announce the game will be on television? The answer seems obvious. Greed. The Raiders-Rams game from 1982 was an absolute classic. It might have been one of the best games of the entire season, as the first ever Freeway Bowl lived up to the hype and then some, even though the teams had two very different records entering that game. And the good news for CBS was that everyone across the country from sea to shining sea was able to see it, even if it looked for a brief moment in time that only the 56,646 fans inside the Coliseum would be able to witness the action. Because sometimes, especially when money is involved, a little bit of pressure can go a really long way. Get your official Jaguar Gear 9 merchandise by going to jg9shop.com, and be sure to like this video, ring the notification bell, and subscribe down below if you haven't already, as it helps the channel out a lot. And be sure to check out Twitch every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern for your chance to play NFL Trivia and win cash prizes. link in the description below. If you want to see videos like this condensed down to 60 seconds, then follow me on TikTok at JaguarGator9. To see college football videos, subscribe to JaguarGator8. To see highlight videos of players throughout the history of the NFL, subscribe to JG9 Highlights. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.